inside the gate where loved ones wait. God's light shining from the throne fills heaven with a song. I can't believe the change in me. I've never felt so free. And I'm just inside the gate. Now at last my mind is clear. Worldly thoughts have disappeared. Now every thought is just of Him. No more worries, doubt, or fear. These new eyes can't shed a tear. Peace and joy now dwell within. I've never felt so young and strong. This place just feels like home. Oh, and I'm just inside the gate. Just inside the gate where loved ones wait. God's light shining from the throne fills heaven with a song. I can't believe the change in me. I've never felt so free. Oh, and I'm just inside the gate. More than I have ever dreamed, ear hath heard or eye hath seen, and I'm just inside the gate. Just inside the gate where loved ones wait. God's light shining from the throne fills heaven with a song. I can't believe the change in me. I've never felt so free. Oh, and I'm just inside the gate. Suddenly the pain is gone that I've suffered for so long.
right, good morning. Well, it's good to be in God's house this morning, among God's people. Good to see you all. We'll be in the book of Numbers, chapter 6. The book of Numbers is probably, if you read as a Bible scholar, as if you would, knowing as you read the book of Numbers, it's a really one of the saddest books in the Bible. It's sad. Numbers, it gets its name from two censuses that were taken of the people. One census was when they left Mount Sinai to go into the promised land. Moses numbered the people. And then, 40 years later, once they were entering the promised land, another census was taken. You say 40 years later, when they were only probably 3 or 4 weeks away from the promised land. 40 years, it took them 40 years later, and we know the story. They did make it to the land flowing with milk and honey after they left Mount Sinai, and they sent out the 12 spies, and for 40 days they spied out the land, and 10 of them came back and said, "Oh, it's just like you said. It's a land flowing with milk and honey." I mean, there's stuff here. It's unbelievable. The prosperity, the land is fertile, everything. But there's giants in the land. I mean, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about giants that are big. You know, a lot of scholars say, the Bible, when it's talking about giants, it's talking about those that are giants in personality or in the deeds that they have done. No, I'm talking about giants in stature, big. Said, we're like grasshoppers. We look like grasshoppers. And of course, Caleb and Joshua, 2 of the 12 spies, they come back and said, "Hey, yeah, this is a land. It's a land. Yeah, there are giants in the land, but God said we can have it. We're going to get it. We can do it. We can do it." And as we know, because of their rebellion, God chose 1 year for every day. That now they spied out the land for 40 days, and for every one of those days, God said, he made a command, told them, he commanded, he said, "There's not one of you over the age from 20 years old and older, you're going to perish. You're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. You're going to perish, and your children, of course, those under 20 years old, will get to inherit the land." But only Joshua and Caleb and those under 20 years old entered the land from those that originally left Israel, which was approximately 2 million people. Out of those 2 million that left Egypt's bondage, Joshua and Caleb, only ones, and those under 20 years old that made it. Now, this morning we're going to talk about something that is being consecrated to God, separated unto God. Back in the day, it was called the Nazarite vow. Now, how many of you are familiar with Lent? Anybody heard of Lent? Well, Lent is a time of about 40 days, beginning with Ash Wednesday and going through Easter, where and like I said, the reason for mentioning Lent is to call attention to its purpose. Now, most Protestant churches do not practice Lent. It's mostly with the Catholics and some Anglican churches. There are Protestant churches that do it, but as the most part, Protestant churches don't do it. But the reason it started out, the original purpose of Lent was for a great reason. It was a time that people would take those 40 days and they would vow, they would consecrate themselves, separate themselves to God beyond their usual call of duty. Now, it has gotten to where you speak of Lent and what people, they want to give up something that's closer, they can be closer to God, and you'll hear things that, they give up chocolate, they give up blah, 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 blah. Stuff that's really not even a part of what originally Lent was supposed to do. But the Nazarite in the Bible days was a living demonstration of what it meant to be separated from the things of the world and separated from sin and separated to God. Now, the Nazarite, how many we hear the Nazarite vow, and one of the most famous that took probably the Nazarite vow that we know would be Samson. Samuel, I believe, was a Nazarite, and also probably John the Baptist. But of all three of these, they were all chosen to be Nazarite to the Lord, chosen to be separated to the Lord before they were even born. Right? I mean, Samson, the angel came to his father and his mother. Same way with Samuel. You remember his mother, praying before God that she would separate him. He would be, from the womb, he would be completely separated and, to God from the time of his birth. God could have him, and that's exactly what happened. And of John the Baptist also. But the term Nazarite means to separate. Verse 1, and the Lord, chapter 6, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speaking to the children of Israel, and saying to them, whether either man or woman shall separate themselves to vow a vow of Nazarite, to separate themselves unto the Lord. Now, as I said, that term means to separate, and it means it's referring to a voluntary practice. Somebody, they're not coerced, but the person individually, he voluntarily takes this vow that at whatever time, whatever time period, whether it be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 6 months, a year, whatever time, he's going to make this vow, this Nazarite vow, where he's going to be completely consecrated, consecrated to God and separated from the world. Is a very, very important vow, and one that was very, God took, as by the way, he does all vows, takes very seriously. Now, like I said, Samson, all these others, even people want to say that I don't believe took the Nazarite vow. He was from Nazareth. But he didn't take the vow as a lot of people thinks he did. But this vow vow was to be separated, as I said, for a certain amount of time, and they were to separate themselves from the world and consecrate themselves wholly to God. Now, when you do that, when you separate, when you take this vow, and by the way, this Nazarite vow is very, very closely, it's a vow of separation, what we call sanctification, okay? We believe that during, once we are saved, we are sanctified, meaning a progressive sanctification, meaning from that time on, we are getting away from the world and getting closer and closer to God. Separating ourselves from the world, getting closer to God. Now, when you do that, when you make this vow, or even as a child of God, when we are saved, to draw near to God, there's something that's going to have to change. Your lives, there's going to be, when you make this vow to God, there's going to be a change in your life. People are going to see the change in your life. And if there's not a change, there's probably not a separation. There's not a conversion. Now, that's how serious it is. Now, the Nazarite vow, let's see what that outward change. Verse 3 says, he or she shall separate himself from wine and strong drink, and shall drink no vinegar of wine or vinegar of strong drink, neither shall he drink any liquor of grapes, nor eat moist grapes or dried. All the days of his separation shall he eat nothing that is made of the vine tree, from the kernels even to the husk. All the days of the vow of his separation, there shall no razor come to his head, until the days be fulfilled in which he separateth himself unto the Lord. He shall be holy, and shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow. And all the days that he separateth himself unto the Lord, he shall come at no dead body. He shall not make himself unclean for his father or his mother, for his brother or sister when they die, because the consecration of his God is upon his head. And all the days, verse 8, and all the days of his separation, he is holy unto the Lord. Now, vows were a common practice in the religious life of the Old Testament saints. These vows were a promise to give something to God, or to do something for him if he helped them, or if he answered for them. You remember back in Genesis, Jacob made a vow, but it was conditional vow. He said, hey, if you'll get me to the land where I'm going, if you'll prosper me, if you'll get me back home, if you'll do this and that and other, then you will be my God. Okay, that was one of the vows we're taking. Okay? Another vow they would take was one that would express gratitude. When God had blessed them with something, they would make a vow that they would live for him because out of thanksgiving and the gratitude for his blessings. But the Nazarite vow, it was different. It was unique because it called for the complete consecration of the individual himself to the Lord. So, that being the case, the regulations was upon things where the Nazarite had to separate himself. Now, the first thing that the Nazarite, one area of denial had to do with his diet. The Bible says, to be consecrated to the Lord, take the Nazarite vow. There was a total abstinence from the use of wine or strong drink, any type of intoxicating beverage. And even going beyond that, even beyond the prohibition of intoxication, because it mentions even fresh grapes, which is the liquor of grapes. That was what would be considered grape juice, and even the dried one. What's dried grapes? Raisins. They were forbidden. Everything to do with the fruit of the vine was forbidden. Now, really, the reason for that's not stated in the Bible, in Scripture, but one of the explanations that I'd read was that as to why all forms of the fruit of the vine was to be avoided, is that the fruit of the vine, more than anything else, represented pleasure and sensual enjoyments of life. And the vow of the Nazarite was a commitment to forego all the indulgences, all the enjoyments, and the common pleasures of life, which is symbolized by the fruit of the vine. Now, he couldn't have any kind of anything from the fruit of the vine. The second thing in the life of a Nazarite involved his appearance. No razor was to come upon his head for as long as the vow was in force. Like I said, these vows might last years. As we know in the life of Samson and Samuel, and it was a lifetime. They was to have their hair was not to be cut. Their hair was the holy crown upon their head. It represented their holiness. Now, what else did it do? It pointed them out from a long distance away. You knew if somebody took the Nazarite vow was coming. Now you say, why is that important, Dwayne? Well, you think that when they seen that Nazarite coming in their midst, this man who had consecrated himself wholly to God, separated himself from the things of this world, what do you think that done to a lot of people that were around him? It brought them conviction. It brought them conviction, especially, even as noticeable as he would be, those that were less dedicated, those who wasn't holy enough to take that vow, they kind of looked and they might have felt a little convicted. And especially among the sinners. You don't think that he got a lot of rebuke and a lot of stuff thrown in his way when he came in there? Sure he did. Why? Because, and how did they note it? Because of the change in his life. The change in his appearance. Listen to me, folks. We might not let our hair grow and never cut it, but there needs to be a change in our appearance. People, by your very appearance, ought to be able to tell, maybe not that you're a Christian, but you're not of this world. You know what I'm saying? Now, third area, they like to say, no fruit of the vine, nothing to do with the grapes, fruit of the vine, anything at all to do. They couldn't cut their hair. And the third area of separation was under no circumstance was he to come in contact with a dead body, animal or human. Unclean. Now, what are we saying all this? What's the Bible talking about when it's giving these restrictions? Listen to me. It costs something. It costs something to be a Nazirite. A Nazirite, to be separated to the Lord, to be considered holy unto the Lord, costs them something. Holiness always costs you something. Listen to me. Folks, listen to me. And by the way, we did take a vow to be holy. We are to be holy as he is holy. And listen to me, that's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you. It's going to cause you to have to sacrifice some things in your life with your children. It's going to make you make those hard decisions that nobody else is making. Now, we, like I said, we believe in sanctification, where we are separated from sin and to God. The results are putting off. That means putting off the old man and putting on the new. Now, as I said, when you do that, when you put off the old man and you put on the new, you're going to be like that long-haired dude walking through this pagan world. This pagan world, you're going to stand. Matter of fact, we ought to stand out in this pagan world. But see, our human nature, we don't like to stand out like that. We don't like to be different. Matter of fact, that human nature, it likes to be like everybody else. You don't want to be different. You don't want to be peculiar. Separation, though, is the primary focus of a Christian life, as it was the Nazirite vow. Do we want to, we need to be able, and the reason why, we wonder why this world's in the shape it's in. Christians, and here's the reason why. We as children of God, we as Christians impact the world the greatest when we're the most unlike the world. Did you get that? We impact the world the greatest when we're unlike the world. The church as a whole, folks, doesn't have a whole lot of impact on this world anymore. Why? Because we're just like it. And why is that? Is because that we don't want to be different. We want to be like, because that human nature wants us to be like everyone else. We don't want to be uncomfortable and be different. But folks, listen to me. There's got to be a change. There's got to be a separation in this world. And it's going to be a visual one too. People's going to know it. Now, there's no question that was posed many years ago. If you were on trial this morning, church, individually, if you were on trial for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Now, listen to me. We're not saved by works. We know that. There's nothing that I could have done, you could have done, no work you could to be saved. But once you are saved, those works have got to be there, because they are what give evidence that you are saved. They are the evidence of your salvation. And a part of that, a key piece of evidence to let somebody know that we are saved is going to be our dedication, our consecration to God. And by the way, like I said, we are commanded in Scripture to separate ourselves from this world and to God. And here's a simple truth. Failure to separate ourselves from the world causes us to be separated from God. Can't have it. Can't have it both. Listen to me. Separation, if we are not separate from this world, then listen to me, we are separated from God. Verse 9. If any man die very suddenly by him, and he hath defiled the head of his consecration, then he shall shave his head in the day of his cleansing. On the seventh day shall he shave it. Now, as I said, one of the restrictions was they could not touch a dead body of any kind, be it animal or be it human. It would defile them. And here, God is making a provision by His mercy and His grace for our failure. Now, can I tell you something that's maybe not real encouraging, but it's the truth? We are, in all likelihood, to somehow fail in this life. Why is that? Because the opportunity for failure is unlimited. Now everything, failure is sometimes, it's not due to us wanting to fail. It's not due to our neglect. Sometimes things happen in our life that are totally beyond our control that cause us to fail. And God allowed for such, especially in our life and in the case of the Nazarite. Now, if any man die very suddenly by him, well, if this Nazarite is with his best buddy or his girl or whatever, and they absolutely have a massive heart attack and die in his arms, dead, he's touching a dead body before he even knows it's a corpse. Somebody dies in the crowd, somebody dies and somehow touches him. Nothing of his doing, no fault of his own, nothing to do with his dedication to God, nothing to do with his separation from God. But guess what? Guess what? The Bible says, if we ask the question, would such a contact with this defile him and render the vow that he made to God, God of separation, would it render it void? God said yes. Yes. He didn't help. He couldn't help. Not something he wanted to do. Something just happened. God said if you touch anything dead, but human, that you're defiled. And guess what? Whether by accident, whether by he's defiled. Now we know that God had different laws for things that were clean and unclean. It went from persons, as we talked, to food, places, objects. Anytime anybody touched something that was unclean, that person immediately became unclean themselves. Now, when a person coming, not the one taking Nazarite, but anybody, if they came in because a dead body was unclean to everybody. But in the case of them becoming defiled, an individual that was, they were unclean for 7 days, and after being defiled by a dead body, they were unclean for 7 days, and the normal procedure for being made clean was they were, after 7 days, they were to be sprinkled with the water, they called it the water of separation, on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and they were clean. That's all it took. They were clean. Now, the Nazarite, though, his wasn't that simple. Of course, he had to follow, the one took now, he had to follow that same procedure, but a whole lot more was required of him. That uncut hair, that was a characteristic mark of his vow of separation. On the 7th day, it had to be cut off. Now, that's not the bad part about it. Let's say he's taken a year, 5 years vow, Nazarite vow. He become unclean. Of no fault of his own, he touched a dead body or whatever. The 7th day, his hair was to be cut off. Let people know that the vow that he made was, like I said, out of his fault or not, no, but it was broken. The vow had been broken, and listen to this, all credit for the time that he had served in this vow. If he was 4.5 years into this vow of this Nazarite vow on a 5-year vow, his hair got cut off, and he had to go back to day one, and the 5 years started all over again. Even though that contamination was unintentional. And on the 8th day, verse 10, and on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtles or 2 pigeons to the priest to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, and make an atonement for him, for that he sinned by the dead, and shall hallow his head that same day. And he shall consecrate unto the Lord the days of his separation, and shall bring a lamb of the first year for a trespass offering, but the days that were before him shall be lost, because his separation was defiled. The individual was defiled, but the vow itself that he made was not nullified. It was still in force, and it still had to be performed. Like I said, even though the time already served was lost. But God, this is God's grace, by the way. This is not something bad. God, in his grace, provided a way whereby the Nazarite could be made clean once more and still be able to carry out his vow of separation. As soon as those 7 days of his purification was done, he cut off his hair. The next day, the 8th day, he was to bring in 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. The first bird was sacrificed as a sin offering. The second bird offered as a burnt offering. As remember, a whole burnt offering was a symbol of complete dedication to God. But in addition to this, the Nazarite, the defiled, he must offer a trespass offering, a lamb of the first year. Now, folks, we're getting it. The two turtle doves, they can be picked up for very little, I'm sure, money-wise. But now we're getting into, he had to also bring in a lamb of the first year. Now, this sacrifice is getting a little expensive, but that just lets me know the seriousness of their sin, the holiness, the exceptional holiness that of the Nazarite. The more, because generally speaking, the more expensive the sacrifice was, the more the infringements of God were, or the judgment, or the sacrifice. The more expensive the sacrifice, the greater either the sin or the more loved by God were you. So by carrying out all these things, it said the head of the Nazarite was once again hallowed or holy. His head was once again holy to the Lord. And as I said, the period of his separation started all over again from the beginning. As I said before, folks, a vow is a serious matter. One that you made, by the way. One that we made to God. They're serious matter. And we've got to be, as a child of God, we got to be willing to pay a high price. We got to be willing to pay a high price if we're going to serve God faithfully. We not only, the Bible says, wherefore seeing we are compassed about with such a great cloud of witness, let us lay aside every sin and the weight that so easily besets us. Let us run with patience the race set forth, looking unto Jesus, the author, finisher of our faith. Romans 12:1, or Hebrews, 12:1. We got to lay aside the sin, not only the sin, but also all the weights. What are the weights? Those are the things that are hindering you. Those are the hindrances. Those things that keep you, maybe they're not sin, but they're things that hinder your service to God. That's weight. That's what the weights are. What are you saying, Dwayne? Hey, we got to be willing to do whatever it takes to please God and to get our reward at the end of this. Now, there was many years ago, in the 1700s, there was a explorer who was exploring the Antarctic. Now, to all you people want to know where Antarctica is, I believe it's what we call South Pole. One of the coldest, one of the most deserted, coldest places on the earth. And this explorer, he put out an ad in a London newspaper. It read this: men wanted for a hazardous journey, little or no wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, your safe return doubtful. Now, how many would jump? How many would jump at that? How many would jump at that? Go get me. Oh yeah, I want some of that. Do you know there were thousands of men that absolutely jumped at the chance, because at the end of this said, at the end of it, it said all these things: honor and recognition in case of success. Thousands of men responded to this ad, willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of adventure and honor. Think about this a minute, folks. Listen to me. Are we ready? Listen to me. Are we ready to answer God's call to deny ourselves, devote our life to Him, go through a little bit of hardness? Hey, the sufferings of this world are not worthy to be compared to the glory God has, for the honor God has in store for us. Are we willing to deny ourselves and to follow Him for that great, great honor and reward that we have at the end of this life? There's a whole lot more than men's recognition and a sense of adventure. Folks, we have a life and life more abundant. We have everlasting life in the port of glory of heaven waiting for us. Listen to me. We can't, and the Bible tells us we can't even comprehend the greatness, the joy, and the beauty of it. That's what we have if we're just willing to answer the call, to give our lives completely to God, devote ourselves. Is that going to cost something? Oh, yeah. It's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you something. But oh, my goodness, the reward's going to be far outweigh anything we have to go through. And this, verse 13. And this is the law of the Nazarite. When the days of his separation are fulfilled, he shall be brought to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. He shall offer his offering unto the Lord, one he-lamb of the first year without blemish for a burnt offering, one ewe lamb of the first year without blemish for a sin offering, and one ram without blemish for peace offerings, and a basket of unleavened bread, cakes, fine flour mingled with oil, wafers of unleavened bread anointed with oil, and their meat offering and their drink offering. And the priest shall bring them before the Lord, and shall offer his sin offering and his burnt offering, and he shall offer the ram for a sacrifice of peace offerings unto the Lord with the basket of unleavened bread. The priest shall offer also his meat offering and his drink offering. My goodness sake, at the end of it all, he had to go through every kind of offering that God had even put in place. Sin offering, trespass offering, wave offering, peace offerings, all these things, everything that you could God possibly do, he had to bring. Now, God said, and he gave a stern warning to people about how sacred vows were and the seriousness of them. But once you made that vow, once that vow was made to God, it was absolutely binding. You couldn't say, "Oh, made a mistake, God. Sorry, I can't do that right now." No. No, it didn't happen that way. It was binding. You might quit, but God said, no. This is a vow you made to me. It's going to be as serious as the day you made it. That's why the Bible says, hey, listen to me. You're better off. Hey, you're better off not to even make any vows. Because breaking it is a whole lot more serious than making it. But once that vow was made, it was absolutely by God considered any failure to keep that vow a serious sin. Even when it was the free choice and voluntary choice of the one making the vow. See, they wasn't coerced. Like I said, they wasn't coerced. They're the ones that, out of their own free will, voluntarily said, Lord, I'm going to vow. I'm going to make this vow. But even though it was was voluntary on our part. Hey, when it came to God, God says, listen to me. Yeah, it might have been voluntary, but listen to me. You're keeping it. You're keeping, and the seriousness of that sin, even though it was voluntary, even though you volunteered yourself, the sin is still there, and it's bad. It's serious. So at the end, went to highlight it all. When the man kept his Nazarite vow, whether it be for a year, 6 months, year, 5 years, whatever, however long the duration, when that time was up and he was successful in keeping that vow, that procedure, celebrating procedure, was at the conclusion. The law, it was called the law of the Nazarite. But he was to bring 4 types of offering: sin offering, burnt offering, peace offering, meat offering, grain offering, drink offering, all these things. Verse 18, because I want to get to this. And the Nazarite vow, and the Nazarite shall shave his head, verse 18, shall shave his head of his separation at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and shall take the hair of the head of his separation and put it in the fire which is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. And the priest shall take that sodden shoulder of the ram, and 1 unleavened cake out of the basket, and 1 unleavened wafer, and shall put them upon the hands of the Nazarite after the hair of his separation is shaven. I'm done. I'm finishing up. Anyway, now, when this vow's taken, when it's all done, he's been successful, it's been completed, it's been consummated. It's consummated by, once again, all that hair is cut off. All that hair is cut off once again. And it's burned as a sacrifice. Man, you know what hair smells like burned? It stinks. It stinks. Now, the hair was shaved off and burned with the peace offering. I want to get to this real quick before we're done. The vow of the Nazarite was about giving extra, going the extra mile. Now, during the peace offering, typically the priest was awarded the breast and the right shoulder. Now, the Nazarite, he had to donate an extra shoulder. Even a little bit, he had to go a little bit, he had to do an extra shoulder. And now the parts of that ram was used for the peace offering. They were placed in the hands of the offer. He was given the priest, and the priest would do this with it. The priest would offer a wave offering, which was this way. And he would offer a heave offering, which was this right here. Guess what that was? Even back then, it was the form of the cross. God was telling us even way back then that the way to peace, the way to peace was going to come through the cross. Study that out. The wave offering and the heave offering. The wave went this way. The heave went this way. It formed a cross, that side motion, and it became the